My name is Jan Gobb. I'm an assistant professor at UNC Charlotte. I've been working with the TTA program for probably 4 or 5 years now. Like Tom, I find it really interesting. I like working with sites and just really getting to know different agencies and help them through their body camera program and with implementation. I've been studying body cameras for about that same amount of time, 4 or 5 years. And I've, like most researchers with body cameras, we kind of started with patrol, the municipal patrol division, and but I've branched out. I've looked at collegiate agencies, specialty police units, so kind of your SWAT, your K9, bike units, things like that, and how they implement body cameras in those units. The impact on courtroom work group, public defenders, prosecutors, judges, et cetera. One area I think that's really interesting that we don't see a lot of research on is the detention center or the use in the courtroom by deputies, and sheriff's deputies. We don't see that very often. We really don't have much research on those issues. And schools and university perspective, we have like 2 studies on that. So these perspectives that we're hearing from today are perspectives that we don't have a lot of research on. So this is, it's kind of neglected in this discussion of body cameras, so it's really important. But unfortunately, it's also can be neglected in discussions about body camera policy and implementation more generally, which is why this panel is so important and also so exciting that we're doing this and having these perspectives being mentioned. As the grant grows and as we see more grantees and sites from different areas, not just your general patrol, municipal police department, but also sheriff's departments that are branching out from patrol into, as we have here, detention centers and the courtroom, but also, universities and school districts are getting them and some other areas as well. So correctional facilities. All of these are areas that we don't have a lot of discussion on, and the policy can be very different, should be very different for a lot of reasons, and in different ways. So I think this webinar this session is going to be really helpful for agencies in that situation. I'm hopeful that attendees will get a lot out of this and please do ask questions. We really want this to be a roundtable sort of discussion. If we were in a room physically, we would be very much discussion based here. So please do ask questions for all of us. And we'll make sure that those questions get asked to the panelists. So please let us know if you have questions. So first I'd like the panel to introduce themselves. If you could provide just a little bit of an introduction for yourself, your agency, maybe how long you've had cameras, that kind of thing, and maybe the perspective that you're bringing to the panel today. We'll start with Chief Book, then go to Sheriff Miller, and then Major Haynes.
Okay, well, thank you, Dr. Gobb. Good afternoon, participants. My name is Ed Book, and I serve as the Chief of Police and the Emergency Manager at Santa Fe College. It's in Gainesville, Florida, and it's primarily a 2-year institution, about 16,000 students, no residential housing. My experience has been 35 years in law enforcement, the last 9 at the college. And most relevant to this panel discussion, this informal discussion today, deals with the fact that in 2016, we did get the BJA federal grant for a BWC program. We were the first agency in our region, forget higher ed, the first agency in our region to have BWCs. And then we were also one of very few colleges nationwide that got it at all. We're now in our 2nd iteration, meaning we have upgraded to our next generation of cameras and docking stations. And it's been a really a terrific experience. Technologically, we've had no problem whatsoever. And I believe that BWCs benefit almost all organizations, whether it's that patrol setting that Dr. Gobb says, or these other non-traditional settings. So thank you. Good to be here.
Thank you for being here with us. Welcome, and thank you from Central Virginia. So we send our greetings to you. I am Sheriff Mike Miller of Bedford County Sheriff's Office. We are a full service sheriff's office, so we do our criminal work also, courthouse, school resource. We have 100 employees. So I've been with the sheriff's office for 36 years and was just recently elected to sheriff in January the 1st. So we've grown up through this agency here, and being able to implement our body-worn cameras, we implemented that over 7 years ago. And it was probably the best thing that we did, or at least I could say it's one of the best things that we did here at this sheriff's office to help our employees. And that's what we have figured out, and they have too. So I'm here to answer any questions and see how this goes.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Simon Haynes, and I'm a major at the Pulaski County Sheriff's Office, which is located in Little Rock, Arkansas. I've been with the Sheriff's Office for 26 years. I currently serve in the Enforcement Division. The Sheriff's Office has 504 employees. We run a patrol side, an enforcement side, and a detention side. On the detention side, we have a 245-bed facility. We have 130 people on our Enforcement Division, and the rest work in our detention division. We started researching body-worn cameras back in 2016 and 17. We're making a move towards it. We realized that all agencies around us had some type of video. Most of them were in-car video. There were some delays, and money is a lot of the issue, but we moved forward. We received the grant in 2019 as well. In 2019, we got serious and started testing various vendors and moved forward and went live earlier this year. I have worked in all areas of the Sheriff's Office to include detention, patrol, investigations, narcotics, internal affairs. I was on the SWAT team for 22 years and the SWAT team commander for 18 years. And the body-worn camera experience, I was that one selected as that guy that got to lead our efforts in research and obtaining the cameras. So I've met most of the bumps in the road that we've had, and it's been an interesting journey, but I think body cameras are a positive thing, and look forward to this discussion that we're going to have.
Thank you to all of you for introducing yourself, giving some background of your sites and your agencies. I'm going to turn it over to Tom to start our Q&A and kind of walk us through the process.
Great, thanks, Jan. And again, I echo sentiments. Bring some questions in. We want this to be interactive and discussion-based. So let's do an overall question to the group, and I'll call you out individually. So the first question that we want to ask is just your overall experiences and observations with body-worn camera in your non-patrol settings, and maybe talk specifically about your agency's officers with their assignments and wearing them, their perspectives, perhaps any challenges that you've seen, benefits that you've seen. So Chief Book, let's kick off with you if you don't mind, sir.
All right, so from the, so our experience has been very, very good. That's kind of the first part of your question with body-worn cameras, and it seems like my colleagues, the sheriff said it well, it's been nothing but benefiting his particular staff. The nuances of higher education kind of overlap with all the law enforcement protocols. So we know all law enforcement, you have acronyms, you have state statute, you have criminal public record, and we have those, and then we overlay those in higher ed, where you have something that deals with student records and non-confrontational settings. And that provides us some real difficulty in determining what we should film and what we shouldn't film. Most of our contacts in a higher ed setting are non-confrontational. They're security-ish. Normally we're trying to figure out what's the overlap look like, what should we film, what should we not film. Beyond that, fairly similar to our colleagues in a patrol setting, and I'll stop there to give time to my colleagues.
Thanks, Chief, very much. Just a quick follow-up for you on that while we're on the topic. What's the perspectives of the students with wearing body-worn cameras?
Well, the students were with us on a collaborative agreement when we started the process. So we had a large community group, and I meant college community group, students, prosecutors, faculty, very important, all the stakeholders were involved in us applying for the grant to begin with. So as it relates to that, the students were 100% supportive. Now we're kind of in a different age today. Organizations that back in 2016 and 2017 that were very supportive of transparency and accountability are not quite as supportive today. This is what we're finding. So those who advocated for filming everything nowadays are worried that they're being filmed. So you have some, it's a mixture. To begin with, clearly supportive. Nowadays, not so much.
Great, makes sense. Thank you, Chief. Major Haynes, overall experiences and observations with your non-patrol setting officers.
Our overall experience has been relatively good. The benefits have far outweighed any of the negative issues that we've run upon. Obviously, when you go from no recording systems at all to a body camera system, and actually we went even further than that with our vendor. We went ahead and put car cameras in and the body cameras as well. And when we moved into the detention facility, that was something that our sheriff was very adamant about. And if you look overall in a detention facility, for a sheriff's office, that's where a lot of your lawsuits come out of. You get your general use of force and things such as that, but there's a lot of other procedural things in there. And initially, everybody think that they're going to, Big Brother's watching and those things. And as we went through the process and the training explained the benefit of them, it's really, in regards to our detention and to our enforcement side, has been more of a benefit than anything. I think the little bit of resistance that you get is quickly settles down once the process starts and they realize that it's actually a benefit for them. So our experience has been overall positive for us. Big learning curve for us though, and I think that especially when you get in the non-patrol settings, what are you really experiencing when you're using these cameras, and what are you recording, and just the sheer volume of what the ability to record in a detention facility is really overwhelming compared to something in patrol where it's just basically call response. So that was something that was a little bit new, and I didn't realize on the onset just how much we would record in our detention facility.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks, Major. And Sheriff Miller, with all your years of experience, talk about how your agency has dealt with and adapted to the non-patrol body-worn cameras. What have you learned, and what challenges have you faced?
Yes, sir. We've learned a great deal. Of course, before our body-worn cameras, as the Major, we had our in-car cameras, which would pick up so much. Then when we started using our body-worn cameras, especially in patrol, we get to see a totally different version. You get to see the walk-up, you get to see what's inside. With narcotics cases, we see where the narcotics is located in the car, which backs up what the officer has said. So it really and truly gave us a new version and a new eye out there on what they're actually dealing with. So the body-worn cameras, I think, as the chief and the Major said, they were hesitant at first, but now they would rather wear their body camera than their firearm, because the body-worn camera is keeping them out of trouble. We've had people call in on traffic stops and tell us how rude our deputies were. So we'd say, okay, give us a day. We would pull the body-worn camera, we would burn it to a disk, then we would ask a citizen if you would really like to come in and see the camera footage, and they declined to come in and said, well, maybe they thought it was, they were thinking it was a different way. So once you get that, the body-worn camera is used to defend our deputies a lot more than the other tools on their belt, because it's used in every interaction here at the sheriff's office. And then we incorporated it with our schools and our school resource officers. We sat down with our school administrators and we told them what we would do and how we use these cameras. And of course, as the chief said, you have to kind of keep that in a different file because of juveniles and different areas there. And then we also sat down with our judges and our courtroom security and went over with our judges on what we were doing and how we were going to use them inside our courtrooms. And everybody was receptive. So you think you have that stigma out there, but once you incorporate these cameras into your department, you find out that it is a great tool to have on your tool belt. And it tells the other part of the story that your car camera cannot tell, because it gets the walk up, it gets everything, the whole interaction is what it does. So at first they were hesitant. Now our guys and ladies here, they love them. And they'll even document. Last night on the radio, as I was going home, I heard one of the deputies sign on and tell dispatch, hey, my body-worn camera just died. So that way they know, and they've documented it in that call, that's why we don't have footage. So they're really getting used to it, and it's been a great asset.
That's great, Sheriff, and I really like the comment. We hear it, but the way you phrased it, it's the best tool on their belt to defend their actions, because we are still seeing, of course, some agencies and officers skeptical and reluctant, but more and more. So I will borrow that phrase again. So thank you, sir. Jan, I'll turn it over to you for the next question.
So I actually have two questions. I'm going to co-op two opportunities. So the first, and it's actually a question somebody else asked. So it was a question that came in on the chat, so I can't take credit for it. So the question was, do any of your agencies equip your detectives with body cameras? And if so, what type of alternate regulations do you have for these employees as opposed to uniformed personnel?
Well, I'll go first. Yes, we do have one that's assigned to our criminal investigators. So it is assigned there. They know when they go out to take certain calls. So it is broke down into how they use it. But then we do have one that is assigned to our criminal investigations division. And they know if they're going out and they anticipate a hostile interview, not only do they have, of course, their tape recorders and all, but they're able to use it also to help us and to help them defend themselves as they are getting out of the car and approaching.
Here at Pulaski County, every sworn officer on the enforcement side has a body-worn camera that is assigned to them. That is their take-home camera. Yeah, we view it very important in the investigations division. For example, ideally, most interviews you want to do up at your main office where you can have them recorded and documented as such. With the body-worn camera and the COVID, obviously keeping 6 feet of social distancing, things like that the camera has actually, we moved early on to doing interviews outside. The detectives wore the cameras and used the cameras to do their interviews. We were able to, in our data storage, isolate these interviews under active investigations where they couldn't be viewed by others. We do require that when they go out in the field that they do have their cameras on when they're conducting interviews and they have them running. Obviously, narcotics units, we treat those a little bit differently. But as far as following up on calls and leads, we find it very important. It's not the times that you think you need it that you need it. It's the times that you don't think you need it is when you really need it. And when that one person says that one key piece of information, now you've got it documented, and you can't get any better than it coming out of their mouth. So there's a lot of advantages to it. It's just being smart how you use it.
So ditto with the major. If you're sworn in a higher education agency, we often don't have differentiation between detectives and SWAT and specialty teams and canine. So if you're sworn, you're wearing it, and that includes me, even though I may not know how to use it. The fact is, I'm just as beholden to those protocol and procedures as everybody else. And often in higher ed and K through 12, SROs also, you have to be mindful of the fact that you are doing a lot of, like I said before, non-confrontational contacts with youth, and how you choose to film and what you choose to film is probably the most important. But we all have them, and it's kind of a catch-all in higher ed or SROs. We all utilize them.
So in a similar vein, what about, so we talked about detectives. So now another question that came in was, what about like SWAT units or those kinds of similar kinds of units that are tactical in nature, and they have, you know, there's lots of discussion about whether they should wear them, whether they shouldn't wear them. You know, what direction have your agencies gone in that regard, and why?
Obviously, narcotics units and undercover operations, if you're trying to get them to blend in, having a body camera mounted square on your chest is not going to let you blend in. We obviously make different concessions for that and what they can and cannot do. If they're out assisting other detectives, they're to wear theirs. If they are interviewing CIs, we do take some precautions in that and do not require them to wear them during some of these operations. But if you're supporting an operation, you're on the outer perimeter to assist, then we do require that you have it on if action has to be taken. If you're actually involved in the situation where you're as an undercover and working with a CI, obviously we don't have you have it on. But anytime that we're going to do a takedown or an arrest, they will have theirs on. So.
Major, let me follow up on that, because that was one of the questions I had lined up too. Is I was on a SWAT team for 15 years, and there were concerns, and we still hear them today, about exposing tactics, about divulging, you know, how we operate. I never really felt that way because it's not a secret, for one thing, and I think the agencies have a really good job of redacting what needs to be redacted. But what would you say to agencies out there right now that are questioning or having information about coming from their SWAT teams about why we shouldn't wear cameras?
Right. I mean, you look at SWAT and where SWAT has progressed in the 26 years that I've been involved in law enforcement. It's gone from, you know, narcotics units with blue jeans and T-shirts and saying sheriff across them, kicking indoors, to it's become a very highly technical field now. Your tactics are sound. They're relatively universal. My first thing that I would say, who do you want telling your story? When you go into a house, depending what type of mission that you're on, if it is a search warrant, a no-knock, or you're using any type of explosive, you're using a flashbang, if you're executing that type of warrant, there's a reason for it. It's going to be chaotic. There's going to be a lot of things going on, and there's going to be a lot of accusations thrown your way if things don't go right. Did you announce properly? Were you wearing the right uniforms? What actually happened when they came in the room? Did you give them an opportunity to drop the weapon? A lot of people do things in a startled state, and that's what we're trying to do. It's the balance of action, speed, and the balance of action that lets you take control of those type of situations. The tactics are generally the same across the board. You vary a little bit, but as much TV shows, movies that are out there, guys writing books, you go to seminars that talk about it. The tactics aren't the big secret anymore. You know, the planning stages of it, the communication with the command staff prior to operation, those are the things that you need to those are the things that you need to keep to yourself. Those don't need to be recorded while you're doing that. But once you load up and you're on your way to do the mission, I find it very important that we have those. We've had several instances where we showed that we did not take action when we possibly could have taken action. And it showed the discipline of the officers and in their decision-making process that they did. So it comes back to, you got to ask that junior SWAT guy, and he's the one that's complaining about it, because your senior SWAT guy usually is not that messed up about it. But the number one question comes back: who do you want to tell your story? Do you want your story coming from what your view was and what you saw and why you made your decision? Or there is no video of anything that you did, and now it's just like I heard on another one, the media, after a period of time, if you're not giving them something, they start digging in your trash and they start pulling stuff out. I would much rather, and I think that's with the way SWAT is now, I don't think that you can go wrong with putting it on there, putting the cameras on these guys. And I think it's a smart decision across the board. And if you do have someone with concern, it's really a sit down and ask that one question: who's going to tell your story?
Good. That's a great answer. Appreciate it. Jan, any follow up, or do you want me to continue on with another one?
Continue. That's fine.
So, Sheriff, I'll ask you this. It's kind of a broad question, and I think I'd like the other panelists to chime in too. So, generally speaking, most police agencies work alongside other agencies frequently. And what have your experiences been related to cooperation, collaboration with body-worn camera, even with task forces? And I guess that touches on our topic of non-patrol functions. What challenges have you seen related to those interactions when you're dealing with agencies who might have different policies, different types of camera, different types of evidence processing? So Sheriff, why don't you start off with this one, if you don't mind?
Okay. Well, the wonderful thing about Bedford County, we have a police department in our town of Bedford, and we work hand in hand together. We work task force together, different options that we need to be there, and we have a great working relationship with them. Now, we don't have the same carrier that with our body-worn cameras. They went with a different company, but we're able to use and interchange, and we will burn our disc and they'll burn theirs, and we'll swap. And matter of fact, we've got a great working relationship with our Commonwealth attorney also. He actually has a Commonwealth assistant that actually comes down here and has the password to our body-worn camera, and he can burn whatever he needs off of our system too, if he would like to. And with the task force, so far we have had no objections. We've had no interference with any department that's come in and knows that we're videoing. So so we've had no problems with it so far that I'm aware of. And even as the captain of operations from last year, I was there for 16 years, and there's been no complaints from others. We have the state police on our task force that works out of our undercover office. He has no problem with how we surround, as the major said, about outside of the house. Our guys are on or have their body-worn cameras on. So when they hit a house, if it's a drug house, and so we've had great success with ours.
Great. Chief Book, anything from your experiences on the same question?
Well, very similar to the sheriff. No issues as far as us sharing data, whether we have different vendors, different technology, whether someone's using a server, a docking station, or storing their data in the cloud, doesn't matter. We have the same prosecutor across the region as most areas do in most states. So that's similar. If we're looking for a criminal, doesn't matter what boundary, what street, what sidewalk they're crossing, we'll share the information. That's just basic police work, no matter what setting. That's sharing information with your colleagues in law enforcement, no matter what the setting. So that's the same. What's different, what's kind of unique to higher education is most colleges and universities have jurisdictions across multiple areas, similar to a sheriff. But for example, my college is across 2 counties and 6 different jurisdictions. So I would say that if you're in higher ed, or you're a college or university that's considering the technology, mutual aid and formal mutual aid agreements is absolutely essential to make it easier to share the data. So that is unique to higher ed. I've talked to 2 different sheriffs and 6 different police chiefs, and we make sure that that relationship is tight so the technology is no issue.
So as a follow-up to that, Chief Book, do you have any issues when you're dealing with those agencies that, like, because if you have to bring them in, maybe not you necessarily, but I know some higher ed agencies, they'll have to bring extra officers in for things like football games, right? You don't have enough officers, but you have 100,000 people on your campus. So, in those situations, do you ever encounter any issues where, you're using different models, or you're, cameras, or some agencies don't have them, but you guys do, or things like that?
It's a great question. So we have the University of Florida. We're the 2-year school, and the 4-year school in our area is the University of Florida Gators. And we work in football operations, combined incident command with multiple agencies, 200 plus law enforcement, serving, if we weren't in COVID, between 80,000 and 100,000 fans in a gigantic event planning. And technology is important. So you may not like this answer, but it's a panel, so I'll be informal. So the short answer for our ability to share is no, there's no issues with that. Because we are under incident command, we may have different gun systems or weapon systems. We may have a different portable, but we're all communicating on one radio channel. That's more essential. Whether we have different vendors on the cameras, that doesn't pose an issue, because if we need to look at each other's stuff, we can still do that via our individual system. So I probably took a long way to say, no, the camera system is not an issue for incident command in a large event. Other systems may be a little more.
I guess I was wondering more if there was a policy conflict, but if you all have cameras, it doesn't matter. But like if you ever have to bring officers in where they come from an agency that they don't have cameras, you know, sometimes you get some issues with that. We see that in municipal agencies too, when you have off-duty assignments with other jurisdictions and things like that. But
so the formal mutual aid agreements
Yeah.
typically address that by saying this: ultimately, you are responsible to your own agency's policies first. And when you're under incident command, that will generate how the event is handled. So again, that doesn't typically pose problem, because standardized agreements in mutual aid will generally deal with that.
And that's good that you bring that up, because when I first started working with TTA, we didn't see that as much. This was an actual issue where people were like, well, what do we do when we have different policies? And so it seems like this is a good solution to that, you know, having mutual aid agreements and putting that in the agreement about the policy. And if your policies are different, you operate on your policy, not ours. And making sure that's all spelled out is really important, especially for university police departments that work with lots of different other agencies.
Yeah, critical. The body worn camera is really not the issue. I know that in my area, the 2 counties that I'm in, if the sheriff tells me to do something, if Sheriff Miller was my sheriff, I'm reporting to that sheriff, because he's the top agent in the person, and we can work out the technological issues. That's typically not a consideration that causes problems for agencies. So body worn camera programs should not be an issue as it relates to interoperability.
Excellent. So I think, Tom, should we move on to the directed questions?
Just check with Major Haynes if he had any observations on this too. I want to give him a chance to chime in, Jan. If he didn't, by all means, please. Major, anything more?
Well, I would just, for us, we were the last kids on the blocks to get the toys, basically. And looking at a lot of the agencies that are around us, they all come to our regional detention facility. We have great relationships with all of our partners that are around us. And in a lot of ways, I find it disappointing. We end up working quite a few things together, and in the technology circle, that different things trigger different cameras. It's unfortunate. We were late to the game, so we went with one vendor, others went with other vendors. While we all share the technology very easily, the triggers, what trigger cameras, aren't universal, and that's a little bit disappointing at times for us. But for the most part, you know, you're sharing LPR information, you're sharing other technical information with each other, and it's all about networking. If you're not networking with your partners and really establishing true partnership, then none of the programs that you try to implement are going to be successful, because everything that one department is doing, other departments are doing as well. And it's, you know, sometimes we have to check our egos and just try to figure these things out. And for the most part, 99% of the time, it's a successful venture for us. So short answer, no, we don't have any problems.
Great. Thank you, sir. Jan, back to you.
So I'll ask one more question kind of to the whole group. We've kind of jumped around on our questions because they come up, you know, through the organic nature of this sort of thing. But what has been your community's response to the implementation of cameras, and what advice do you have for organizations in terms of community or stakeholder involvement or discussion? I know, Chief Book, you mentioned that you had a huge group, you know, with all kinds of stakeholders. at the university level, you have a lot of different stakeholders. But if you could speak to that a little bit more, maybe how you put that group together. I think you said you did it just to do the grant, I think, is, if I understood you correctly. So if you could speak to that, and then you know, Sheriff and Major, if you could chime in as well, just with that community engagement.
Certainly for those who are considering putting together a grant proposal, you want to have your stakeholders involved and have letters of support to make sure that they're telling you as a collective community, we want it in our community, because that's the whole ball of wax as it relates to a body-worn camera program. Why would you have anything that nobody supports? That's no different from the sheriff or the major. We started 2 years in advance of the grant. We said, who are our stakeholders? They're probably not much different than both my county counterpart and the two county counterparts on the call. It's your prosecutor, it's your public defender, it's your main community nonprofit or organizations that drive policy. That could be an ACLU, that could be some of our minority or ethnic groups that have a lot of voice and say in policy. For me, it's faculty, staff, and students, right? If you put those together, we put them together because we knew if we get them on board to say we want it, then we have just put together something that says, why wouldn't we get it? And it just strengthened our application. But we didn't put it together to get the grant. We put it together because if they don't support us as a community, I'm not sure why we would do it.
Yeah, same thing here in our community. I reckon the big buzzword, it really isn't, is education. You go out and you educate your community. You educate, as the chief said, your stakeholders. You tell them why you want to do it, and boy, does it show transparency. And you know, that's what we hear a lot of today. And we're able to be transparent with our community. We're able to be transparent with our stakeholders, and we're educating them along the way, which means that they have bought into the program, and that's what it's all about right there, in my opinion.
Just my quick comment on this is, I think your stakeholders, your prosecutors, local legislators, senators, all those that you seek out during your grant process, no doubtedly support you 110%. And I think, especially last year, the body cameras really making a big push, and it's the buzzword in enforcement. The biggest stakeholder you got are the people that hold your purse strings. They'll tell you till the cows come home that, yes, we support you in getting this program. We support you in getting this program. You start seeing the bill on what it costs for storage and for what you're doing in this. And my statement is, you've got to convince them to put their money where their mouth is, because they're going to get in front of constituents and tell them that they think this is an important venture. And when it comes time for funding it, they want you to fund it out of your existing budget. And as we all know, budgets are tight for everybody. So it takes great commitment from your either city councils, quorum courts, or whatever your financial body is that you have to report to get your funds. And that's extremely important. Community, man, I have not heard a negative tone from the community until they start seeing bills roll in. And you get a little pushback on that sometimes, but when you outweigh what your results are versus the money that you're asking them to spend, I don't think that you can. You cannot not support a body-worn camera system, but you've got to convince them to put their money where their mouth is.
I know you have a lot of sessions over these 2 or 3 days, but what the major said, that's not unique challenges to a non-patrol setting. That's a challenge to every organization, and I think we'd be remiss if just not mentioning it. If I had a tip for organizations that are looking to enact a body-worn camera, the major actually just hit on it. It's number one, do things that are going to insulate your long-term recurring cost. I know for us in higher ed, I don't want to say we're cash poor, but we're cash poor, right? That's just law enforcement's not where we want to put our money to educational. So the things that insulated us, we're having a multi-year contract. So if your agency is trying to pursue, go for a multi-year contract so you wipe out recurring costs for a period of time, and realize that if you can get the equipment cheap, nowadays it's all about the storage, what the major said. The equipment comes basically, we want to give you the equipment so you use our storage and proprietary systems. So those are 2 tips to really think about, is have a multi-year contract and understand that where your costs are going to be are likely on the storage side, not the equipment. All the vendors want to provide you the equipment so that they lock you into their system of what to use.
Thank you, all of you. Tom, do you want to take the next question?
Sure, I want to add, I think it relates to what we're talking about to some degree, and see if there's any feedback from the panel. We get agencies on occasion, and this has been a national topic, when you're dealing with task forces, when you're dealing with federal partners, whether they're assisting you, you're assisting them, it's been a really strong discussion of the agency saying, you know, we don't want cameras on, or you saying we're not going to help you if our cameras aren't on, or policy conflicts. And I know there's been some, I actually spoke to somebody on the federal level who's been working on this. Any experiences with that or recommendations from the panel if agencies are seeing that come in, those obstacles that may present with federal joint operations? Major, you want us to kick off if you have anything?
Sure. Currently, our policy, if we have someone assigned to an FBI or DEA task force, which a lot of departments around here will, while they're doing work under the umbrella of them being a task force agent, we allow them to fall under their rules and how they conduct their business. And therefore, that they're not required to wear the cameras during that period. Anytime that they're falling under our umbrella and what they're doing, we are. In regards to SWAT operations, other operations as such that other agencies may be involved in, if we're doing a multi-SWAT operational thing for DEA, taking down several targets, relatively, we ensure that our tactical teams, they stay intact. The other agencies' teams stay intact as well. So for most part, our guys are operating with our own people, and so we don't really run across those problems very much. But probably the biggest thing is that if they're on a task force and acting in the capacity of that task force officer, we allow them to fall under their guidelines on what they require them to do.
And yes, sir. I echo what the major said. We're on the U.S. Marshals Task Force, so we fall under their rules when they're out operating with them. So we have 3 officers, 3 deputies that are assigned to the Marshals Task Force. So we play well in the sandbox and make sure that we go by their rules and they go by ours if we have to use them or they use us. So everything works out pretty well.
Well, Sheriff, let me follow up on that, because that exact scenario, and I've been part of one when we were going in after a fugitive, where you got 2 marshals saying we could use some help here, and then you got 12 deputies that are assisting the marshals going after the fugitive. Do you have an MOU in place? Is it automatically that, hey, we're going to deactivate our cameras because the marshals want us to? Do you see any future problems with that? Let's say there's the shooting after the entry's made, and people are saying, why'd you turn your cameras off?
Right. Well,
if that is what you would.
Now, we have an MOU with our marshals, and if they're here in our county and we're assisting them, then we've really not had anyone say you have to turn your cameras off. If they feel comfortable in wearing their cameras, then they wear their cameras. And our guys really feel comfortable wearing their cameras. I mean, it truly is that. And if you don't have it in your agency, you kind of wondering, what's he saying? But it's true. They truly feel comfortable. And when they get up in the morning, they put that uniform on, they make sure that those cameras are on. Is what they do, or they're mounted on their vest is what they do. So we really have had no conflict because of the MOUs that we have in place. And again, it's the working relationship you have with all of them, federal or state.
Thank you, sir. Makes complete sense, and I agree with the relationship part of it totally. Any other observations on that from the panel with the conflicts with task force or anything with federal partners?
Just real quick from that standpoint, if it's our ones that are assigned to the task force that we allow to fall under the federal guidelines. If they call up and say, we've got a guy in the house and we send 10 people out there to help, they're required, operate under our policy, and we'll assist them as much as we can assist them, but we're going to operate our cameras under our general policy. It's the only ones that in the task force that are officially signed into the task force, sworn into the task force, and operating as a task force member that are excluded from any of our camera policies.
Thank you, Major. Jan, I'll turn it back to you. I do see a question came in. I'll review it and follow up with your question if you have additional.
So I do have a question, actually. So one thing I hear a lot from specialty units when I talk to the officers in specialty units or non-patrol units is I wish that our administration had talked to us when they put the policy together. And so I was just curious if any of you, you know, in the course of putting together your policies, made any allowances for just differences in how, I mean, especially in the sheriff's office, you know, you've got your patrol, deputies doing patrol, and you've got deputies doing detention centers, and you've got deputies in courtrooms, you've got them doing all these different things, and whether or not there were any policy differences in those things, and if those different assignments, and if you kind of consulted with those folks in those assignments to kind of get some feedback and kind of do this kind of iterative feedback loop, I guess, with regards to policy.
Well, as I said earlier, we brought everybody on board. That's what we did. We brought our school resource officers. We both have the school administration come together, and they know, again, the purpose of this. We did the same thing with our deputies at the courthouse, with the judges. And you have to do that. Again, I'm going to use the word education. You have to educate everybody, including your road units, your field deputies, and you have to educate them on the purpose, because, of course, we're all human. First thing you think is, somebody said it early in the very beginning, it's Big Brother, they're going to be watching us. But once they find out that you actually use this tool to help and support their actions, then it's easier for them to buy into it. And then once the new recruits come, as I believe the major said, the senior guy takes care of the junior guy. You know, he tells them, hey guys, I've been through this. The body-worn camera has truly helped me out. This situation. Yeah, best thing you can do is put that body-worn camera on every morning. So we've gone out. We educated everybody, as I said, over 7 years ago, and now they're taking care of educating themselves.
One example I can provide is simply that in a higher education setting, I told you before, we maybe do things that are more security-ish. So we may unlock or lock different doors all day long, and it's a call for service. And in most procedural body-worn camera documents, a call for service is recording on. So it wasn't 1 week into our 6th draft of our body-worn camera policy that the officer said, you know, we filmed about 7,000 trillion door unlocks and locks. And I'm not sure that we need that footage stored. And there was no doubt they were on the money. So unless unlocking a door, locking, securing something turns into a confrontational conflict or something that's likely to involve the necessity for filming, we took it out. That was just a simple, very practical application in a higher education setting. Beyond that, I think the great benefit of the training and technical assistance program as it relates to body-worn camera, and I know that's, you know, part of the big sponsor for this conference, is that you have 40 standards that are best practices already. So you at least start with best practices across non-patrol, patrol, SWAT, whatever, it doesn't matter. Start with those best practices, then go directly back to your different areas of your particular agency and say, what doesn't work amongst these best practices? But we already have a framework that's working pretty well, that's been put together over several years. And I think that framework helped us put together our policy.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, Chief Book, about the lock and unlock. As somebody who's had to ask campus police to unlock their door, it is kind of one of those unique things that you don't think much about. But yeah, it is a call for service, right? So it's good that the officers at least said something, and you were able to take that out of the policy. But it's one of those things with boilerplate kind of language. A lot of people use kind of as a starter template, use that boilerplate language. and you don't necessarily think about it until you get into it a little bit. That was what we were hearing from specialty units was, the boilerplate language works fine until you realize, it doesn't quite work the same way for a canine, or it doesn't quite work the same way for the bike unit. And so they had to make little tweaks to their policy. So, yeah.
All right. We don't need 4,000 videos of different doorknobs, right? So we took the best practices, but you can adapt them for the particular areas that we're all working in. And the best practices still as a whole are best practices.
Absolutely. Major Haynes, did you have anything to add?
Well, I would say that, yeah, we had a lot of involvement with majority of our areas in regards to our policy. But I think the one thing that you have to realize when you do your policy on a new program is that it's going to end up being a living thing. You want to adhere to your scorecard, make sure that you're hitting all those points that you said you would. But it all comes down to what categories do you want to have, retention, that you're going to keep some of these things in, and really how you want to execute. How many videos are too many, and so forth. It's a living thing. And I think anyone that gets involved in a body-worn camera project realizes it's a lot more than just putting the camera on a guy and he goes out and does the job. You've got to, more questions come up than what you would ever realize. And for instance, how are you going to handle your prosecutor? Well, they're a partner right in the beginning, but until you get a good year and a half into your program where they're actively prosecuting cases that you're dealing with, it's a whole new ball of wax for them. Now, yeah, I support you, but how can I get involved with this? And these are the things that you'll end up evolving in your policy and the way that you conduct your business. So my number one thing that I would say is that it's good to have the policy. Just remember, it's going to be a living thing until you can really get it ironed out.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay. Oops, sorry, Jan. I think we've got 1 minute left. So I just wanted to take a minute. I know Bridget's going to close up, but to thank the panel. I think hopefully you found the information helpful to you. I thought there were some great responses. We got to most of the questions, not every one, but I want to thank you for that. And before we turn it over to Bridget, Jan, any closing comments?
No, thank you all to the panelists. I think we got some really great discussion going. Everything from those specialized areas, the SWAT, detectives, narcotics, all of those, the undercover, that kind of stuff, to collaboration, stakeholders, policy. I think we hit everything. So thank you all for your time, and thank you participants for your questions.
And also keep in mind the TTA website. There's a lot of good information on this topic if your questions weren't answered or you want more. So with that, thank you. And Bridget, please wrap up for us.
Thank you, Tom. And thanks for such a great presentation. I really enjoyed this session, and I think it was very informative.